What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files. Today, I just wanted to do something a little bit different, a little experimental. If you guys end up liking it, then let us know, and we'll definitely do more of them. One of our upcoming episodes here in the next couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, is going to be King's Dark Tidings by Kade. And I kind of wanted to do a somewhat of a book review, just to make people like aware of this series and what it's about. I feel like it's this series that is on a lot of people's TBR list, but they never really get to it because I think a lot of people either don't really understand what it is or how cool it is, or maybe they see some bad reviews and think like, oh, like I'll get to it someday. But my goal today is to get you to read it right now, to get you to put it at the top of your TBR list, or at least one of your next like 2 or 3 reads, so that more people can get into it, and also so that you can enjoy our upcoming episode, so that we're not just putting up this episode of a series that you've never heard of and never read. Hopefully this will get you into the series. Honestly, it's a pretty quick read, especially if you do the audiobooks, which we definitely recommend. They're awesome. But yeah, there's 4 books in the series so far, with a prequel coming out either later this year or early next year, and then book 5 is coming out after that. So now is a really good time to kind of hop in and read these with those on the horizon. If you end up liking this episode and want to see more like these, more of these kind of mini reviews, definitely let us know, because I would totally be down to do more of these. Maybe just do like a quick like 15-minute like why you should read this series before each of our episodes. So if you guys like it, definitely let us know. Definitely follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy, and subscribe and like down below here on YouTube. All right, so let's get into it. So what is King's Dark Tidings about? King's Dark Tidings is a fast-paced, very modern fantasy series that mostly follows our main protagonist, Rezkin, although the POV does hop around a bit in later books as his entourage kind of gets bigger and bigger. It's very much half and half lighthearted, but also a very serious story that gets more and more complex as the books goes on. There's also a little bit of dark fantasy in there because Rezkin is basically like a rogue assassin type character. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but he's trained from birth to be the most powerful and lethal person in all of Ashai, the country that we find ourselves in at the beginning of the series. And yeah, we see him do some pretty brutal things and definitely morally gray things. A lot of people kind of think that he is a monster, and it leaves it up to the reader to decide where they land on that. He is taught all these rules that ensure he is as efficient as possible, and they kind of work as his only guidelines in life. Like that, it's like this code that he follows, and he sticks to it. Like it's like lodged in his head that he can't deviate from these rules. Except at the beginning of the series, like at the very beginning of the first book, he doesn't know what the first 2 rules are. So, you know, we see a little bit of his training in the first book. And by that, I mean about a chapter before it catapults us into the main story. which is actually something I like a lot. I've been reading a lot of books where there's like this extended training period, and it's like several chapters of them learning how to do what they do. And I feel like it can be done right, but more often than not, it's a little bit of a slog. And so in this one, it's like I said, it's literally maybe a chapter that we see his training, and it's really, really good. I enjoyed that chapter a lot. And it gives you a lot of insight into how he grew up and who his two masters were that trained him. But yeah, I just really appreciated how kind of quick it got us through that. It was short and sweet. The main story picks up where there's this big fight at the fortress where he spent his entire life to train to be this master, like lethal assassin kind of person. And after the fight, he has to go into the outworld, which is essentially just anything outside the fortress. And it's not like this apocalyptic wasteland or anything. It's just like the normal world. But he has spent his entire life in this fortress. So it's very, very alien and very different for him, which leads to a lot of really fun situations. And so right before he leaves, his masters are dying, and they tell him the last two rules, saying, kill with conscience and protect and honor your friends. The book makes it clear that these are not what the master meant to say, but Rezkin doesn't know that. So he ventures outside the fortress to discover his purpose in life and kind of unravel the mystery that is his entire life. Why was he raised all alone in this fortress? Why did this battle happen? And who is he? And so there's kind of a lot of mystery that goes along with this series that you're kind of finding out little bit by little bit throughout the series that really keeps you engaged. As he goes outside the fortress and discovers the city for the first time, which is one of my favorite scenes, we see how kind of socially unaware he is by being raised all alone in this fortress. Like his entire life, he doesn't have any, he can fake social functions and stuff, but he doesn't actually understand it. So, one of the rules is protect and honor your friends. He meets somebody, and this is all at the very beginning of the book. This isn't spoilers at all. He meets someone who casually calls him friend, and it kind of gets his gears moving, thinking like, oh, they're a part of this secret group called Friends, because he thinks his master is like referring him to like this secret underground group. And so he meets this person, and day one he like dedicates his entire life to protecting and honoring them. And it just leads to a lot of like really great misunderstandings and kind of befuddlement. That's just like, it's so wonderful and I guess like innocent. And the whole like first quarter or so of the first book is him trying to figure all this out. And that's like one of my favorite parts of the series, is just how socially like unaware he is, and him just kind of learning. So as the books go on, the plot gets more and more serious. More friends join his group, and it just gets bigger and bigger, and there's more people that he kind of takes responsibility for. We get, one of my favorite things about this series is we get a very steady drip feed of new information and mysteries revealed. And I think, that's just something that's so cool about these books is, you're not getting one mystery revealed per book. And it's like at the very end of the book, like every single chapter, there's something new that is like, oh, wow, like I didn't know that was coming. And it's so surprising and it's happening with such regularity. I just appreciated it so much, and it's always keeping you engaged. The plot gets so crazy. Like, obviously, I don't want to spoil anything, but you will not be disappointed by this plot. It gets so big and so nuts, and things get revealed that are just like, I don't know. It just makes me so happy. So let me tell you a little bit about Kade. She is a self-published female author. She also wrote the Shroud of Prophecy series, like Fate of the Fallen, and I think there's another one coming out this winter. That series is not self-published. It's published through, I forget who that's published through, but it's not self-published. She's very good at writing characters, and I think that's the thing that I appreciate the most, along with how she writes the dialogue between them. The discussions between characters in these books is one of my favorite parts, because they are so real, like, for better or for worse. They're so real. They're also very funny. And, I just appreciate them for that. They sound like conversations that people would have. They don't sound like cringy or fake. They're very, very well written. She interweaves plots within plots and tells this story in a way that is never dull and always captivating. This series really is the definition of fast-paced. It grabs you and does not let go. The audiobook narrator, and I really recommend listening to the audiobook. I think that's really the only way to consume these, because it's so good. Nick Podell is the audiobook narrator. If you've listened to King Killer or the Land series, then you know his work and you know what to expect from this book. If you haven't heard him, he does all sorts of voices and does some of the most convincing accents and female voices that I've ever heard. Like, they are spot on. He brings the entire story to life in a way that is few and far between with narrators, easily rivaling the Dresden Files and books like The Gentleman Bastards. Okay, so who is our main character? Rezkin is our main protagonist, and he's very much a rogue warrior type character, but this is not your typical assassin fantasy. I know that kind of gets a bad rep sometimes, although I do think that if you liked the Night Angel trilogy, you will probably like these. Rezkin is shrouded in mystery, and even at the end of book 4, you're still left wondering who this guy is and like where he comes from and like what his lineage is in the best way possible. It's not like an aggravating like, oh, why don't I know this yet? But it's just a desire to learn more and more about him, and just the excitement of the reveals that will come later. The thing that people kind of dislike about this series is they see Rezkin as a bit of a Mary Sue character, who has like way too much plot armor and is super overpowered. And honestly, in a way, they're right, but they're completely missing the point. The whole point of his character and the whole point of the book is that he is trained from birth, day and night, 24/7, to be the most lethal human being in the world. So it's very much baked into his character. It's baked into the series. And it's part of who he is, and it makes sense for the narrative. I understand why some people don't like that, but for me, when I was reading it the first time, I I very much understood that this is someone who is supposed to be overpowered. And that's not to say that he doesn't run into obstacles. There's a lot of things that are really difficult for him to do because, after all, he is only human. So it's not like he has like superhuman traits or anything. But he is like super powerful in knowledge and skill. He has a lot of plot armor, but like I said, we see him struggle with lots of other things like social interactions. And it gives you this feeling that deep inside, he is incredibly lonely because he just doesn't really fit into this world. He was raised in such a different way than everyone else that that he just has no one who really understands him. Rezkin is also usually very wise and always has some lesson for his friends to learn. One of my favorite conversations in the books is this scene with him and another character named Raylan. And he's having this conversation about how she feels that she has to prove herself as a warrior to the men because she is a woman and feels like she is looked down on. And he says things like this all the time. He says, if you live your life only seeking the approval of others, you will live no life at all. You will indubitably fail. For if that person cannot appreciate you for who you are, then he or she will never appreciate you at all. You'll always be trying to prove yourself, and it will never be enough. And I love these moments where he gets very real and he's just like so wise, like wise beyond his years because he is a young protagonist. So every time he says something like this, everybody in the group kind of like pays attention. One of the most endearing things about him is his sense of honor. Even though the last two rules are misunderstood, he stays true at every turn to protecting and honoring his friends. And he takes the position of friend very seriously. He takes it so seriously that it changes the way that I now look at the word friend. And every time someone is named a friend in this series, you know how much weight that it holds, and it really means something beyond how you would normally think of the word. And it comes with all these implications of, if he names them friend, then he is now dedicating his life to protecting and honoring them. And so it just makes for very cool moments and very cool relationships with him and his inner circle. And it's a huge, if nothing else, that's a huge selling point in the series, just how those relationships develop and kind of the character arcs of kind of how all that goes down. It's really worth reading the books alone for that. Okay, so finally, what do we enjoy about King's Dark Tidings? What we enjoy most about this series is really how good the characters are. Every character is flawed in such a real way. These characters aren't perfect, and the conversations that they have with each other feel so real because they're not perfect either. We are so incredibly invested in these characters and care about every single one, even the side characters who don't get much screen time. Like, I would literally take a spin-off series of any character in these books. The plot is incredibly fast-paced and is just so addicting. Every time I do a reread, I am just all consumed by the story. I can't think of anything else. And just the wonder and fun of it. because it does have kind of like that lighthearted fantasy feel. The story has so much heart in it. It's one of those stories that just really pierces your heart, whether it's making you laugh or cry or just keeping a steady smile on your face. Like, especially book 2, I had a smile on my face the entire time I was listening to it. And it goes back to those characters and the conversations they have. It's really hard to explain, but the conversations in these books are so good. The books are also a prime candidate for multiple rereads if that's your kind of thing, because you will not catch everything the first time through. Every time I read them again, I notice something new or some bit of foreshadowing that I had missed the first time. I think I've read them all like 6 times now, and even on this last reread that I'm doing right now, there's still things that are popping up to me like, oh, I didn't see how that connected last time. So that's a lot of fun if you're a multiple reread kind of person. King's Dark Tidings is such an interesting combination of lighthearted and a darker fantasy world, because Rezkin basically, like I said earlier, Rezkin basically is an assassin, even though that's not all he is, and you'll find out more as you read. And we see him do some brutal things and make deals with the underworld of Ashai and neighboring countries. Like in these books, we see thieves guilds and assassins guilds, people who don't play by the rules of society, and are usually deemed less than sterling. The books are also really funny. They're not like so funny that it takes away from the immersion in the plot, because I think when things get a little too zany, it can take you out of it, which is probably the reason I haven't read Discworld. But all of the people who follow Rezkin can be such idiots compared to him, and it leaves the door wide open for hilarity to ensue. There's a bunch of like, maybe not a bunch, but there's like a good handful of like really goofy characters that are always coming up with some snarky remark, and especially like Rezkin being confused by a lot of the people in his company are just leads to like really, really funny moments, because he has no idea like what they're talking about half the time. The magic system is also really good in these books. Essentially, there's all these elements that a mage could possibly have, and they're kind of broken down into like a pie chart, like depending on what the ratio is of all these different elements and how much you have of each can make you a radically different mage than the person next to you. So like if you have like a certain ratio, you could be like a destruction mage or a healing mage or a life mage, so that you're good with plants and animals and that kind of thing. There's a ton of these different classes of mages, and in book 2, it gets explained really, really well. We meet a character who explains the whole thing to us, and we get to see the exact process by which a spell is actually cast in really good detail. So at the end of the day, for me, it's really all about the characters and the mysteries that get revealed little by little. Learning more and more about each one as the plot progresses, and the characters are just so lovable and feel so real. Even though some of them may be like annoying or you might hate them, they do feel real and are really well written. I think that's about all I can say without spoiling too much. This is in our top 3 favorite series for sure, maybe even top 2, and I just cannot recommend it enough. You really, really need to go read it. You know, shoot it to the top of your TBR. There's a prequel book coming out, I think later this year or early next year. And then book 5 comes after that. So it's a perfect time to go through them. And once you start, you really will not want to stop, because the ending of each book just leads you right into the next one. There is not a paperback version of them yet, but you can pick them up in ebook and audio formats. And like I said, I really, really, really recommend the audiobook because it's just so good. Nick Podell is just a master of his craft. So definitely read through those and join us for our King's Dark Tidings episode coming up in the weeks to follow. Thank you guys so much for watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or now on Google Podcasts. Please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy. Until next time, protect and honor your friends.